You know what's worse than losing your mother at 15? Watching your father choose to believe you're a thief instead of trusting the daughter who never gave him a reason to doubt her. I was accused of stealing money, jewelry, and even credit cards from my own home. My father looked me in the eyes and called me a liar. He chose her word over mine every single time. And the worst part? Years later, when he finally discovered the truth, when he came crawling back with tears in his eyes begging for forgiveness, I said the two words that destroyed him completely. Too late. This is the story of how my father's betrayal cost him everything, and why some broken trust can never be repaired. My name is Sarah, and this is the hardest story I've ever had to tell. It's been 7 years since I walked out of my father's house, and 3 years since he showed up at my door, broken and desperate, trying to undo the damage he caused. But some wounds don't heal. Some choices have permanent consequences. And sometimes, the people we love the most become strangers we can barely recognize. Before I dive into the nightmare that became my teenage years, let me take you back to when things were good, when my family was whole, when my father was actually my hero, not the villain of my story. My childhood was pretty close to perfect. My mom, Jennifer, was one of those people who made everything feel warm and safe. She was a fourth-grade teacher who treated every kid like they were her own. She'd come home with stories about her students, and you could see how much she genuinely cared. Our house always smelled like whatever she was baking, usually her famous chocolate chip cookies or her apple pie that won the county fair 3 years in a row. My dad, Robert, worked in construction management. He was the kind of father who showed up to every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every birthday party. He taught me how to ride a bike, how to change a tire, how to stand up for myself. We had this tradition where every Saturday morning, just the two of us would go to this little diner downtown and order pancakes. He'd ask me about school, about my friends, about my dreams, and he actually listened, like really listened. I was their only child, and they made sure I never felt lonely. Our home was filled with laughter, family game nights, weekend camping trips, and endless inside jokes. We weren't rich, but we had everything that mattered. We had each other. Looking back now, those memories feel like they belong to someone else's life, like I'm watching a movie about a happy family and trying to remember what that felt like. Everything shattered the summer I turned 15. Mom had been complaining about headaches for a few weeks. We all thought it was stress from work, or maybe she needed new glasses. She kept brushing it off, saying she was fine, that she just needed to drink more water and get more sleep. Then one morning, she collapsed in the kitchen while making breakfast. I heard the crash and ran downstairs to find her unconscious on the floor. I'll never forget the sound my dad made when he saw her. It was this guttural, terrified sound that I still hear in my nightmares. The ambulance came, the hospital visits started, the diagnosis came fast and brutal. Stage 4 glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor that had probably been growing for months. The doctors gave her 6 months at most. She lasted 4. Those 4 months were a blur of hospital rooms, chemotherapy sessions that left her exhausted and nauseous, and watching my vibrant, energetic mother fade away piece by piece. My dad and I took turns staying with her. We held her hand, read to her, played her favorite music. We told her we loved her 1,000 times a day because we knew our time was running out. She passed away on a rainy Tuesday in October. I was holding one hand, Dad was holding the other. Her last words to him were, "Take care of our girl." To me, she whispered, "Be strong, baby. You're stronger than you know." I wasn't strong. I was broken. And so was my dad. The year after Mom died was the darkest period of my life, until it got even darker. My dad threw himself into work, staying at construction sites until late at night. I think being home reminded him too much of Mom. Every room held a memory. Every corner of our house echoed with her absence. I was drowning in grief myself. I stopped hanging out with friends, my grades dropped. I'd come home to an empty house, heat up frozen dinners, and spend hours in my room, crying or staring at the ceiling. My dad and I barely talked. We were both so lost in our own pain that we couldn't reach out to each other. Our Saturday morning diner traditions stopped. Family game nights were a distant memory. The house that used to smell like Mom's baking now just smelled cold and empty. We were two ghosts living in a museum of our former life, and neither of us knew how to fix it. I don't blame my dad for struggling. Grief is brutal, and everyone processes it differently. But here's what I needed him to understand, what I needed him to remember. I lost my mother, but I still had my father. I needed him to be there for me. I needed him to fight through his pain and remember that his daughter was hurting too. Instead, he found someone else to ease his loneliness. Her name was Diane. My dad met her at some community grief support group about a year and a half after Mom's death. She was a widow herself, her husband having passed away from a heart attack 2 years earlier. She had no children of her own. At first, I was cautiously optimistic. Maybe this would help Dad heal. Maybe having someone to talk to would bring him back to life. He started smiling again, going out occasionally. He seemed lighter. As much as I missed Mom, I didn't want Dad to be miserable forever. Diane seemed nice enough in the beginning. She'd smile at me, ask me polite questions about school, compliment my hair or my clothes. But there was something behind her eyes that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Something calculating. Something cold. It was like she was performing kindness rather than actually feeling it. They dated for about 6 months before Dad sat me down and told me he was going to propose. I was 16 by then. He asked me how I felt about it, and honestly, I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt like it was too soon, like he was trying to replace Mom. But another part of me just wanted him to be happy again. I wanted our house to feel like a home again. So I told him if she made him happy, then I was okay with it. Looking back, I wonder if things would have turned out differently if I'd been honest. If I'd told him I had reservations. If I'd said I needed more time. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at City Hall. No big wedding, no celebration, just a quiet legal proceeding that made Diane my stepmother and a permanent fixture in our home. That's when everything started to change.
Diane moved into our house immediately after the wedding. Within 2 weeks, she had redecorated almost everything. Mom's pictures came down from the walls and were packed away for safekeeping. Mom's favorite throw blankets disappeared. The kitchen was reorganized. Even the furniture was rearranged. When I protested, Dad said Diane was just trying to make the house feel like hers too, that it was important for her to feel comfortable in her new home. He asked me to be patient and understanding. But it got worse. Diane started making little comments. "You know, Sarah, you really should spend less time moping in your room. It's not healthy." Or, "I'm making dinner at 6. I expect you to be at the table on time, dressed appropriately. We're a family now, and families eat together." She installed all these new rules. I had a curfew that was way earlier than before. I had to ask permission to go anywhere. I had chores assigned with specific deadlines. If I didn't complete them to her satisfaction, she'd complain to Dad about how disrespectful and lazy I was becoming. My dad, who used to be so involved in my life, started deferring everything to Diane. Ask your stepmother. Whatever Diane thinks is best. Diane's in charge of the house now. I felt like a stranger in my own home, like I was being slowly erased, just like Mom's pictures and blankets had been erased. But the worst was yet to come.
It started small. Diane mentioned to my dad that $20 had gone missing from her purse. She didn't accuse me directly, but the implication was clear. "I'm sure I left it right here on the counter. I counted my cash this morning. Now it's gone." Dad asked me if I'd taken it. I said no, because I hadn't. He seemed to believe me, but there was this tiny flicker of doubt in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Then Diane claimed that $50 vanished from her wallet, then $100. Then she said one of her bracelets was missing, a silver one that supposedly had sentimental value. Each time, she'd bring it up at dinner, sighing dramatically about how she must be going crazy, how she was sure she'd put these things in specific places. And each time, my dad would look at me with increasing suspicion. I tried to defend myself. Dad, I didn't take anything. I don't know what she's talking about. Why would I steal from my own family? But Diane was clever. She never directly accused me. She'd say things like, I'm not pointing fingers. I just think it's strange that these things keep disappearing. Or, maybe Sarah's having trouble adjusting and acting out. That's completely normal for teenagers dealing with loss and change. She played the understanding stepmother perfectly. Concerned, not accusatory. Worried about me, not angry. It made her seem reasonable and made me look defensive and guilty. My dad started checking my room. He'd go through my drawers, my backpack, my closet, looking for the missing items. He never found anything because there was nothing to find, but the fact that he was looking, that he didn't just take my word for it, shattered something inside me. This was my father, the man who taught me that honesty was the most important value, the man who always said he trusted me completely. And he was searching my room like I was a criminal? The final straw came about 4 months after Diane moved in. I came home from school one afternoon to find my dad and Diane sitting in the living room waiting for me. Dad's face was stone cold, angrier than I'd ever seen him. Diane looked upset, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Sit down, Dad said. His voice had this edge I'd never heard before. My stomach dropped. I knew something bad was coming. Diane's credit card was charged $1,500 at the mall yesterday, he said. Purchases at stores you like. Clothes, makeup, electronics. Want to explain that? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? No, I didn't. I was at school yesterday. I didn't go anywhere near the mall. Diane spoke up, her voice trembling. Sarah, I'm not angry. I'm just worried about you. If you needed things, you could have just asked. You didn't need to steal my credit card. I didn't steal anything, I shouted. Dad, I swear, I didn't do this. I don't even know where she keeps her credit card. Check my room. Check my stuff. I don't have any of those things she's talking about. Dad's face was set in stone. I already checked your room. I found shopping bags hidden in your closet, designer clothes with tags still on them, a new phone, makeup. Everything matches the charges on Diane's card. I felt the room spinning. That's impossible. I didn't buy those things. Someone planted them there. Dad, please, you have to believe me. I would never steal from anyone. But he didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. The doubt had turned into certainty. His daughter, in his mind, was a thief and a liar. I'm so disappointed in you, he said, and those words cut deeper than any knife could. After everything we've been through, after everything your mother taught you about honesty and integrity, this is who you've become? I was crying now, begging him to listen. Dad, please. Mom told you to take care of me. She told you to remember who I am. I'm not a thief. You know me. You know I wouldn't do this. But Diane put her hand on his arm, playing her role perfectly. Robert, maybe we should look into therapy for her. She's clearly struggling more than we realized. This kind of behavior is a cry for help. That's when I understood. This wasn't about money or credit cards or shopping sprees. This was about getting rid of me. Diane wanted my father all to herself, and I was in the way. She'd been systematically building a case against me, planting evidence, creating a narrative where I was the troubled, lying, stealing teenager who couldn't be trusted. And my father had bought every word of it. Dad's punishment was severe. I was grounded for 6 months. No phone, no computer except for homework, no friends, no activities.
I had to come straight home after school every day. He made me get a part-time job to pay back the money Diane claimed I'd stolen, even though I'd never taken a single dollar. But worse than the punishment was the way he looked at me, like I was a stranger, like I was something shameful he had to deal with. The trust between us was completely shattered, and it was all based on lies. I tried talking to him, tried explaining, tried getting him to see the truth, but Diane was always there, always in his ear, always reinforcing her narrative. I know this is hard, but we have to show her that actions have consequences. We're doing this because we love her. She needs structure and discipline. My dad ate it up. He'd found someone who made him feel less alone, and he wasn't going to let his troubled daughter ruin that. I became the problem, the burden, the disappointment. I stopped trying to defend myself. What was the point? He'd made his choice. He chose to believe a woman he'd known for less than 2 years over the daughter he'd raised for 16 years. He chose his new wife over his own flesh and blood. I started counting down the days until I turned 18 and could leave.
Those last 2 years of high school were survival mode. I kept my head down, did my chores, went to work, saved every penny I earned. I applied to colleges as far away as possible. I stayed out of Diane's way and barely spoke to my father unless absolutely necessary. Diane seemed pleased with this arrangement. She had won. I was neutralized, no longer a threat to her perfect little setup with my dad. She'd occasionally make passive-aggressive comments about how much more peaceful the house was now that I'd learned to behave. My dad tried to have conversations with me sometimes, asking about school or work, but they felt hollow, forced, like he was going through the motions of being a parent without any real connection behind it. The man who used to know everything about my life now knew nothing. And whose fault was that? I got accepted to a university 5 states away, full scholarship. I'd worked my ass off despite everything, and it had paid off. When I told Dad, he seemed surprised that I'd applied to school so far away. "You're really going to leave?" he asked. And I almost laughed at the question. "What's keeping me here?" I replied. He didn't have an answer.
The day I turned 18 was the day I left. I'd packed everything I cared about weeks earlier, boxes stored in my friend's garage. The morning of my birthday, I waited until Dad went to work and Diane went shopping. Then I grabbed my essentials, called my friend to help me load my car, and left. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out of that house and never looked back. I'd like to say I felt free, but mostly I just felt numb. I was leaving behind the house where I'd grown up, where every room held memories of my mom, where I'd been happy once. But that house wasn't home anymore. It was a prison, where my father had chosen to believe lies about me rather than trust the daughter he'd raised. As I drove away, I passed that little diner where Dad and I used to have our Saturday morning pancakes. I let myself cry then, mourning not just my mom, but my dad too. Because the father I'd loved, the one who'd been my hero, was gone. He'd been replaced by a stranger who'd betrayed me in the worst way possible.
College was my fresh start. Nobody knew my story. Nobody knew about Diane or the accusations or any of it. I was just Sarah, a girl studying psychology, working part-time, building a new life. I changed my phone number. I didn't give Dad my dorm address. I blocked him on all social media. As far as I was concerned, I no longer had a father. He'd made his choice, and I was making mine. Sometimes I'd wonder what he thought when he came home that day and found me gone. Did he care? Did he try to find me? Did it even register that he'd driven his only child away? Or was he relieved that the problem had removed itself? I threw myself into my studies, made new friends, went to therapy to deal with the trauma of everything that happened. Slowly, painfully, I started to heal. I learned that I was strong, just like Mom had said. I learned that I could survive without my father's love and approval. I learned that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. I graduated with honors, got a good job as a counselor at a youth center, and eventually bought my own small apartment. I dated, made mistakes, learned, grew. I built the life I was proud of, one where I was surrounded by people who actually believed in me and trusted me. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And most importantly, it was free from lies. 4 years after I left, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was my dad. His voice sounded wrecked, like he'd been crying. "Sarah, please don't hang up. Please, I need to tell you something." I should have hung up, but I didn't. "Diane left me," she said. "She cleaned out our bank accounts and disappeared. I found something when I was going through her things. Evidence. Receipts, statements, everything. Sarah, she made it all up. All of it. The money, the jewelry, the credit card charges. She set you up. She planted everything. I found the items she claimed were stolen hidden in her own closet. I found receipts showing she made the purchases herself and hid them in your room. I found... God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. You were telling the truth the whole time and I didn't believe you." I felt like I couldn't breathe. 4 years. 4 years I'd lived with the knowledge that my father had chosen to believe lies about me. 4 years of being estranged from my only living parent. And now, he was telling me I'd been right all along? "Why?" I managed to say. "Why would she do that?" "I don't know," he said, his voice breaking. "The police think she's done this before. Married vulnerable men, turned them against their families, then robbed them and disappeared. I was so stupid, I was so lonely after your mom died that I let this woman into our lives, and she destroyed everything. She destroyed us." There was a long silence. Then he said the words I'd once desperately wanted to hear. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I failed you. I failed your mother. I should have believed you. You're my daughter. I should have trusted you. Please, can we talk? Can I try to make this right?" Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. When I saw him, I barely recognized him. He looked like he'd aged 20 years and 4. His hair was completely gray. He looked thin, exhausted, broken. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back. I wasn't ready for that. We sat down, and he slid a folder across the table. Inside was all the evidence he'd found. Receipts in Diane's handwriting, bank statements showing she'd withdrawn the money herself, photos of these stolen items in her storage locker, even a notebook where she'd apparently planned the whole thing, noting when to report items missing, how to gradually escalate the accusations. Looking at it made me feel sick. This woman had systematically destroyed my relationship with my father. She'd manipulated him, used his grief and loneliness as weapons, and he'd let her. "I reported everything to the police," Dad said. "They're looking for her, but she's done this before. She's probably already in another state with a new identity." "Good for you," I said flatly. "You get justice. What do I get?" He looked at me with devastated eyes. "I want to make this right.
I want my daughter back. I want to earn your forgiveness. Please, Sarah. I know I don't deserve it, but please, give me a chance." I thought about it. I thought about all those Saturday mornings at the diner. I thought about him teaching me to ride a bike. I thought about him sitting by Mom's hospital bed, holding her hand. I thought about who he used to be. But I also thought about him searching my room like I was a criminal. I thought about the way he looked at me with disgust and disappointment. I thought about him choosing Diane over me, over and over again for 2 years. You want to know what the worst part was? It wasn't the false accusations. It wasn't being grounded or punished for things I didn't do. It was that you didn't believe me. You're my father. You raised me. You knew who I was. And you chose to believe a stranger over me. "I know," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life."
Mom's last words to you were, "Take care of our girl," I continued. "Do you remember that? She trusted you. I trusted you. And you let both of us down." "Please," he begged. "Please, Sarah, I'll do anything. Therapy, family counseling, whatever you need. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Just please, give me a chance." I looked at this broken man in front of me, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no love, just emptiness. "When you needed me after Mom died, I was there," I said quietly. "I was drowning in my own grief, but I was still there. We could have helped each other. We could have gotten through it together. But you pushed me away. You brought a stranger into our home and let her tear us apart. And when I begged you to believe me, when I cried and pleaded and told you the truth, you looked at me like I was garbage." "I know. I'm not finished," I cut him off. "You had chances, so many chances. Every time I tried to tell you what was really happening, you shut me down. You chose her. And now that she's gone, now that you have no one, you want me back? I'm not a backup plan, Dad. I'm not something you can just dust off when you're lonely." "That's not what this is," he said desperately. "I love you. You're my daughter. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you." "You love me," I repeated. "But you didn't trust me. Love without trust is meaningless, and you taught me that."
"So, what happens now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I took a deep breath. Now, nothing. I have a life now, a good life, friends who believe in me, a career I love, an apartment that's actually my home. I built all of that without you. I don't need you anymore. But I need you," he said. "You should have thought about that before you called me a liar and a thief. You should have thought about that before you chose Diane over me. You should have thought about that before you let a stranger matter more than your own daughter." I stood up to leave. He grabbed my hand. "Please, Sarah, I'm begging you. I have nothing left. I lost your mother. I lost you. I lost everything that mattered. Don't let it end like this." I gently removed my hand from his. "You didn't lose me, Dad. You threw me away. There's a difference." "What can I do?" he asked. And he looked so broken that a tiny part of me, the part that still remembered Saturday morning pancakes, almost wavered. Almost. "You can learn from this," I said. "You can be better if you ever have anyone else in your life. You can remember that trust, once broken like this, can't be fixed with apologies. You can live with the consequences of your choices." "So that's it? You're just gonna walk away?" "That's exactly what you did to me," I said. "You walked away from me emotionally long before I left physically. You chose to believe I was a thief rather than consider that maybe, just maybe, your new wife was lying. So yes, Dad, that's it. I'm walking away." "I don't accept that," he said, a flash of his old stubbornness showing through.
"You're my daughter. I won't give up on you." "Then you'll be disappointed," I said. Again. That was 3 years ago. He's tried to contact me a few times since then. Birthday cards I return unopened. Emails I delete without reading. Voice messages I erase. He showed up at my apartment once, and I told him through the door that if he came back, I'd get a restraining order. I heard through old family friends that he's living alone in a smaller place now. Diane had indeed cleaned him out financially. He's working long hours trying to rebuild his savings. He looks lonely and lost whenever anyone sees him. Some people think I'm cruel. They say everyone makes mistakes, that I should forgive him and move on. They say he's my father and he deserves another chance. But here's what they don't understand. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I've forgiven him in the sense that I don't walk around angry and bitter. I've processed what happened in therapy. I understand that he was vulnerable and manipulated. I even feel sorry for him sometimes. But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to let him back into my life. It doesn't mean I have to pretend that what he did was okay. It doesn't mean I have to give him the relationship he destroyed. Actions have consequences. He taught me that, ironically, when he was punishing me for things I didn't do. Well, now he gets to live with the consequences of his actions. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he'd believed me from the start, if he'd investigated Diane's claims before accepting them as truth, if he'd remembered who I was, who he'd raised me to be. Would we be having Saturday morning pancakes right now? Would he be walking me down the aisle at my wedding someday? Would my future kids know their grandfather? But those are hypotheticals. The reality is that when it mattered most, when I needed him to stand by me, he didn't. And that changed everything. I've learned a lot from this experience. I learned that people will show you who they really are when times get hard. I learned that trust is fragile and precious. I learned that you can love someone and still need to protect yourself from them. I learned that being alone is better than being with people who don't believe in you. Most importantly, I learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. Mom was right. I'm strong. Strong enough to walk away from a toxic situation. Strong enough to build a life on my own terms. Strong enough to set boundaries even when it hurts. My father made his choice years ago. He chose temporary comfort over his daughter. He chose to believe lies because they came from someone who made him feel less lonely. He chose wrong, and now he's living with that choice. If you're listening to this and you're in a similar situation, whether you're the child whose parent doesn't believe them or you're a parent trying to navigate a new relationship, hear me out. To the kids, your feelings are valid. If someone in your life refuses to believe you, refuses to see the truth even when you're begging them to listen, you are allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to build boundaries. You don't owe anyone your continued presence just because they're family. Family is supposed to be a safe place, and when it's not, you're allowed to find safety elsewhere. To the parents, your children are not expendable. Your children are not the problem when they're telling you uncomfortable truths. When your kid is begging you to believe them, really listen. Don't let anyone, not a new partner, not a friend, not anyone, come between you and your child. Because if you do, if you choose to believe lies about your own kid, you might wake up one day to find they're gone, and they're not coming back. My dad thought he had time to fix things. He thought once the truth came out, everything would go back to normal. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some trust, once destroyed, is gone forever. He has no wife and no daughter now.
That's what happens when you betray the people who should matter most. That's what happens when you choose convenience over truth. That's what happens when you forget that family is supposed to mean something.
I don't know what the future holds for me and my father. Maybe decades from now, when I'm older and he's elderly, I'll feel differently. Maybe time will soften things. Maybe it won't. All I know is that right now, I'm at peace with my decision. I have a good life. I have people who love me and believe in me. I have a career helping other young people who are going through difficult family situations. In a weird way, my experience made me better at what I do. I can look a teenager in the eye and honestly say, I understand. I've been there, and I can tell you that you'll survive this. My mom told me I was strong. She was right. I'm strong enough to walk away from people who hurt me, even when they're family, even when they're sorry, even when they're broken and alone. This is my story, the story of how my father's betrayal cost him everything and why some broken trust can never be repaired. Thanks for listening.